Right. Well, kia ora koutou, ko Victoria McLennan toka whangaua, and welcome to this, our first Lunch and Learn of 2024. Today, I am joined by Chloe, who is calling in from Otatahi, Christchurch. Welcome, Chloe.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thanks, everyone, for joining us. And this is a focused Lunch and Learn talking about job hunting and recruitment and in the context of a modern age. So we're going to be covering a lot of topics, but you can ask questions of Chloe via the Q&A function, which I'll pass on to her during the webinar. So keep those questions coming. So Chloe, to kick us off, why don't you give us kind of your potted history and tell us a bit about yourself and your boutique agency?
Sure. So good morning, afternoon. I'm not too sure what it is at that time, everybody. My name is Chloe. I'm born and bred French, just outside of Paris. Moved over to New Zealand about 12 years ago now. Started my career in HR, so internal recruitment, then moved to the agency space, so did it a bit of it differently. I've been recruiting in the tech sector for about 6 or 7 years. And after being made redundant during the pandemic, started my own agency, EXO Recruitment. And it's been going for 3.5 years. And we've focused in the tech space quite specifically since we started as well.
Awesome. Great story. I love hearing that, you were made redundant and you started your own agency and now it's going really well.
Thank you.
Fantastic. So let's just crack right on with it and set the scene a bit. So post-COVID, we saw many New Zealanders leave for overseas. We also saw businesses ramping up, resulting in what was generally described as a skills shortage for the last couple of years. But so far in 2024, the evidence would indicate that the tide is turning or has turned, with job advertisement numbers down, the government and private sector starting to lay people off, including digital technology workers. Is this consistent with what you and the EXO recruitment team are seeing at the moment?
It's definitely slower and the market has definitely gone tighter. So if you were to compare it from maybe a year ago or 2 years ago, there's definitely been a bit of a break being put in recruitment. However, and you and I were just talking about that, things are quite cyclical. So yeah, we've seen a lot of people moving out of New Zealand, and I think there's still a major trend with that. I still speak to a lot of people that are moving away from New Zealand, usually to Australia, for a variety of reasons. Quite often, better wages, cost of living is a little bit lower there. There's been, particularly with our borders being closed for so long, there's been a much easier pathway to visas over in Australia, which obviously is very appealing. And the weather, I don't know about you, but it's pouring down in Christchurch at the moment. So the weather in Australia, I'm not going to lie, is very appealing right this minute. So so there's still be a big trend in terms of that, expatriation out of New Zealand, which hasn't helped with the skills shortage. Now, as I said, it's still definitely gone slower and the market has gone a little bit tighter. And unfortunately, yes, there has been a lot of redundancies happening. We've all heard or at least know people that have been affected about it. But I think the way I'm seeing it and the way my team and I are seeing it is that we're more going down to pre-COVID levels, which were already a skills shortage environment, just not as crazy as what it's been in the past couple of years. So I know that technically, from an economical sense, we are in a recession. I think the economic definition is 2 quarters down on GDP. So technically we are in a recession, but that's because we're only taking very recent data. But I think if we're looking overall at the past 5 years, the way I'm seeing it is that we are stabilizing ourselves to where we were before, and that being boom in the economy has just stabilized. So, we're still very busy. We still have our clients growing, and our clients are still coming to us to find people. So still very much a demand out there for these roles, a little bit more targeted, and companies are probably a little bit more picky in terms of who they're hiring. And I guess if you've been in New Zealand, maybe in Christchurch for a long time, the way I can probably relate it would be post-earthquake Christchurch. So post-earthquake Christchurch, in the construction space, pretty much everything and anything was going for about 4 or 5 years. If you had the tiniest bit of construction skills, you could get a job anywhere and be paid the big bucks. And then after 5 years, once the boom of the reconstruction, post-earthquake reconstruction sort of died down, those sort of skills faded out, and companies still had a need, but were a little bit more picky in terms of who they were getting. And so I think we're getting to that stage as well.
Nice. I want to talk a bit more about roles in the market in a second, but first I want to ask you about recruiters. So yep. I remember when recruitment consultants first came on the scene, because I'm old and grey, as you can see, and they were pretty shady people. They didn't form a relationship with a candidate. They just completely focused on getting your CV and dropping it into a potential hiring manager. And I know this has changed dramatically over the years, but there will still be people potentially listening to this who have got that kind of negative perception about recruiters. So can you tell us a bit about how you work and the partnership approach that you take to developing someone when you have a role that you're recruiting for?
Yeah, of course. So unfortunately, those practices still very much exist. And I actually made a social media post about that a couple of days ago, because I did come across that sort of practice no later than last week. When the market is a bit tight, when a lot of big recruitment agencies, because you are targeted on how much money you make, they kind of push, consultants to meet a certain amount of targets and meet a certain amount of KPIs. And so it does create those unsavory behaviors, unfortunately. We've been on both sides. So I've been a migrant, unable to find a job in New Zealand. I've been made redundant twice in New Zealand and struggling to find a job. And I've been that person that applies for jobs and doesn't hear anything and never gets an answer. And I've been on the other side as well, where I've helped people get sometimes their first job in New Zealand or get their dream job. And so I guess one thing that we've made really, really clear is that we want to learn from those experiences and also remember those experiences because we lived them ourselves, and make sure that we're treating people basically the way we want to be treated, or we would have wanted to be treated when we were in that situation. So, we'll often provide a whole lot of of advice, sometimes for free. And I've passed on to you earlier a interview preparation guide. It is available to download on our website as well, but I know that you're going to send it to all the people that are here today. So that's something that we've made available for people. And we just generally, I think it sounds cliche, right? But we care. We care because we have been in that situation, and we care because we have been those job seekers. We have been those people that don't hear about anything, and we know it's not fun, and we know we don't want that. And so we build those relationships. We really spend some time understanding what people are looking for, both from a job seeker perspective, but also from a company perspective, and make sure that we understand what they are looking for, and then make sure that we match that properly. One of our part of our vision, it says to not be job fillers and KPI followers, and we're not trying to make square pegs fit into round holes, but we're here to find and advise you alongside the process. If for example, you have salary expectations that are completely out of market, we will tell you. And what you do with that feedback is up to you. But we're here to advise you and we're here to guide you through the process. Part of our values are that perseverance, honesty, being ethical, building relationships. And so we do take that quite at heart. And I'm saying that about us, obviously, but everybody who works with a recruitment agency should do their research and find the evidence that backs that up before they decide to work with an agency, whether you are looking for work or whether you are looking to employ or to work with an agency to recruit someone.
Nice. So honest, integrity, and having walked in people's shoes, I think that's fantastic to learn that from you. So let's just really quickly talk about the market at the moment. What are the kinds of roles and skills that employers are looking for right now? What's hot, what's popular?
Yeah. So the technical skills are still very much a thing. So, I'm still seeing a lot of software development roles, and I am currently recruiting for a few of those. We're still seeing some demand in the systems engineering or that sort of desktop support space as well at different level. So there's definitely those requirements here as well. But what I really see from employers and what they really want is more the soft skills. There's really been a shift in the past few years in terms of understanding from an employer's perspective, of understanding that you can train a technical skill. That's something that can be taught and can be learned, but the soft skills cannot. And more and more employers nowadays are really hiring personalities over skills. So, ability to be taught and ability to learn, and that willingness to be taught and learn as well is very, very important. Flexibility. A lot of businesses, particularly in times of change, can be quite reactive, or sometimes will go one direction and then we'll have to pivot, next week because they realize that something wasn't working. So being flexible and being adaptable is a really big thing. And the culture fit. And that's obviously a very company-driven type of criteria, and it's very much something that will be independent to companies and that will be individual to companies. But generally just being a nice person and being a good person that's willing to give a helping hand to someone, or that will fit in well within the team, that will play well with others, that will share their toys, is usually something that companies are really, really looking for. And quite often at similar skill level, that personality will make a difference for sure.
That's great advice and insight, and definitely aligns with what I'm hearing from employers at the moment. And so being really open and honest and adaptable and coachable and all of those things are really important. So let's talk about, for those who are listening to this who might have been displaced or are facing a restructure, might have been in a job for a long time and now they're out job hunting for the first time for a while. Let's talk about some of the skills that they kind of need to develop. And the first one is starting with their CV. What's your advice to folks who haven't updated their CV in a long time? How should they approach this?
Yeah. So and that's going to sound horrible to say, but recruiters or internal recruiters or hiring managers don't have much time to review CVs. Okay. Typically they will spend a few seconds on a CV. So you need to make your CV as clear as possible. And then the fluff and the detail and the explanation will come in the cover letter and in the interview process. So CVs, the information on the CV should be straight to the point. Your name, your phone number, your email address. That's it. Don't put your physical address. Don't put where you're from. If you are on a visa, put your visa up there because that will be a question, but just very minimum personal information. I personally am not a fan of fluff on CVs. A lot of people will put a quote or things like that. That's just taking space. And I'm all for keeping things quite straight to the point, because you don't want your CV to be more than 2 pages long. And 2 pages long would be if you've got 20 years experience. So I quite like things to be straight up there. Job title, dates you've worked in that company, month and year, not just year, because that can make quite a big difference to the amount of time you spend to a place, and you don't want to leave someone guessing. So month and year, your role, little bit of information about the company, 2 lines, and then bullet points. Bullet points about the projects you worked on, what you did, what tech stack you use. Keep it simple. Bullet points are particularly important because nowadays a lot of people will look at that on their phone. And so bullet points kind of helps clarify with the small screen, and it makes it much more readable on a phone as well. So I like, if you have a LinkedIn profile, just look at the way a LinkedIn profile is made, that it does exactly that. And that's the right way of doing it. So there's plenty of templates on the internet where if you literally just type CV template into Google, there will be plenty of templates that you can use and that will do exactly that. But keep it simple, keep it straight to the point, and also tailor it to the job that you're applying for. If there's, for example, if you're a software developer and you're applying for a role with a specific tech stack that you have experience with maybe 3 years ago, maybe highlight it in your CV or bold it, or just find a way to make it pop, so it will be seen straight away. So just make sure that you tailor your applications as well.
So I've got a great question from the audience, from Adrian. How do you show your soft skills on a CV?
Yep. So quite often that's a part of it's like the hobbies or personality or extracurriculum side, and showing your personality there will again come with actual examples. Everybody says, I'm a team player. I like listening to music and I like long walks at the beach. That doesn't really say anything. If you say you're a team player, show how you've been a team player. So, for example, you coach Ripper Rugby for your kids and you go to Saturday practice and Saturday training every week. Or you were the person that was always organizing the Friday afternoon teas in your office because you are a master organizer. And so people were counting on you to do that. So just give actual examples. So for me, for example, I'm very competitive, and which in a recruitment, which is a sales-driven environment, is something that's quite beneficial. So I wouldn't just say competitive, but I will say that I used to be a boxer and I used to compete as a boxer, which shows my competitiveness and my aptitude to be trained and be disciplined to prepare for a fight. So that's how you show your soft skills in the CV, is by giving concrete examples of how you applied those soft skills in real life.
And one thing that I'm often asked by people, so I'll see what your view is, photo or no photo?
I don't mind the photo, obviously providing that it's professional. If it's a selfie that you've taken at the club on a Saturday night, don't put that on your CV. Again, not where I don't like the photo is that it takes space. So for a photo to actually be visible and represent you properly, it has to be a certain size on a CV, and it ends up taking quite a bit of space. So I would say no, if you have, 20 years of experience and you need those 2 pages to make your CV fit or your experience fit, no photo.
And then the other thing people often ask me, sorry, off the cuff question, but if you've had a career break, such as you've had children, you've been away, or you've been traveling or looked after an aging parent, how do you represent that on your CV?
Just be honest about it and write it down. The worst thing that you can do is leaving someone guessing. So let's say if you had children between 2010 and 2015 and you took a 5-year break to look after your kids, put on your CV 2010, 2015 career break to look after my children, or to raise my children, however you want to word it. But the worst thing you can do is put nothing. And then someone will see that and be like, okay, well, what happened? Were you in jail? Were you sick? What happened? Were you just not working because you won the lotto and you decided to do nothing? So you're better to address every time there's an elephant in the room, you're better to address it upfront, because you don't want someone to perceive or imagine something any different. And I'll give you a quick example for that. A few years ago, I interviewed someone to work with me as a consultant, and the entire time this gentleman had his hand in front of his mouth like that. And it was really annoying me because I was struggling to understand what he was saying. And all I could focus on was his hand in front of his mouth. And about 30 minutes into the interview, I went, look, I'm really sorry. What is happening? And he pulled his hand away and he was missing a tooth right here. He was missing one of his front teeth. And he said, I played rugby over the weekend, knocked my tooth out, couldn't get an appointment to the dentist for 2 weeks. And I didn't want you to think that I had a brawl at the pub on Saturday night. And I went, it would have been so much easier if you had just walked into the room and said that up front, because all I could focus on for about 30 minutes was why do you have your hand in front of your mouth? And so quite often you're just better off to get it out, say what happened, and then we can move on from there.
Nice. We have 2 more questions from the audience. One is cover letter or no cover letter?
Depends. Some roles will require you to write a cover letter. I like cover letters if they are actually tailored to the job and really explain why your application is right for the role. So I see a lot of cover letters that are just copy pasted, that just said "Dear hiring manager" at the top,
or written by ChatGPT, right?
Or written by ChatGPT, exactly. We know when you do it. We know, right? Don't. So that, no, okay. If you're not going to spend the time actually tailoring your cover letter, just don't even bother sending it. Your cover letter, if you choose to send it, should be addressed to the person that you're sending it to, so the person that is advertising for the role, and it should really describe in more depth how your skills relate to the particular position that you're applying for, with concrete examples. Again, still bullet points. I love bullet points, but concrete examples of commercial work that you have done that relates specifically to this job in this company. So cover letters, yes, only if they're tailored.
And so we've got another question. Do you as a recruiter look at the cover letters, or do you just go straight to the CV?
I'll go to the CV first, because obviously I'm recruiting for a set of skills, but then I will look at the cover letter if I have it, particularly for more explanation. So sometimes I'll see a CV because I'm not technical myself. I will see some information that sometimes I'm not quite able to relate, or I'll be like, I think I understand, but I'm not sure I do. In that case, I will go to the cover letter and find this explanation. And that's where, when I find the generic cover letter or the ChatGPT cover letter, I'm like, well, you've missed out on your opportunity to tell me what you were doing. And you have to remember that as well. Quite often, particularly a company that may have an HR recruiter or an internal recruiter that is not a hiring manager, they may not be technical. They may not understand everything that you do. I've been working in the tech sector for 6 years. I can have a conversation with a software developer without sounding dumb. Put me in front of a line of code and I'm absolutely incapable of reading it, So it's your job to pass on this information and show this information proactively.
I've got 2 more questions on CVs, and then I want to move on to talking about interviews for the last few minutes.
Sure.
So quick answers if possible, is it a good idea to include a short video resume link in your CV?
I've not seen it much. Short answer, it's not a bad idea. But once again, don't overthink it and don't overdo it. So it could be a plus, but it could also not be watched.
And then a great question from a student member of ours. What can they include in their CV when they're applying for graduate roles?
University projects. Be very specific on the projects that you have worked on at university and explain what you did specifically, not what your group did, but what you did specifically as part of the group, what technology you used, and what was the outcome.
And one of the things I also say is all of the jobs you've ever had as well, because it proves you've got a work ethic, which is so incredibly important, isn't it?
Absolutely.
So let's move on to interviews in the last few minutes. So some people really dread interviews, and for people who haven't had one before or haven't been to a job interview in a while, I know you've got a guide that I'm going to send out to everyone who's attending, which is great. But is there some key advice that you give people about interview prep?
Yes. Research, 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 and more research. Know the job description. Do some research on the company, on maybe the person. If you've been told the name of the person that you're interviewing with, do some research. Go on LinkedIn, go on the company website, find out some info. I'm not saying go stalk them on Facebook.
I was going to say, yeah. There's a fine line, because I've had people turn up for interviews and I feel a little creeped out by how much research they've done on me.
No, of course. Don't go all stalker on it.
Yeah.
But, if the information's on the website or if it's on LinkedIn, or maybe you may Google their name and you find some article of some charitable work that they would have done, things like that you can use to relate then to that person. Do that. Don't go on their private Instagram to stalk them and see what they ate for dinner. That's just too much. So do your research. Do your research about the physical aspect and the logisticals aspect as well. So how long is it going to take you to get to the job? Is there parking? Do you have to take a bus? Do you have to drive? Do you have to walk? So just make sure that you do all that research. Know your CV. I get a lot of people that come and interview with me, and when I ask them a question, they have to read their CV before they can answer me. I would think that if you worked a specific job, you should be able to talk to me about this job. You may not remember specific dates or specific names, which is fine, but you're able to tell me about what you did in the job, even if that was 10, 15 years ago. I remember what I did in my first ever job 12 years ago. So just know your CV, know your background. And as tricky as it sounds, you're selling yourself. So you want to be prepared to sell yourself, and you want to be prepared to talk about money and have those conversations that may be a little bit difficult, a little bit uncomfortable to have, but you want to position yourself in a place of strength, and so you want to be prepared to have those conversations. So the best advice, if there was only one thing you need to remember about interviews, is preparation and research.
Nice. Two more quick ones from the attendees on the Q&A. If recruiters receive a large amount of CVs, and I know I recruited for a role recently and I had 300 applicants, so it's a lot to wade through. Do they actually read through them all, or do they just read through them until they find 5 candidates that they think are good?
I can't speak for every recruiter, but we read through them all and we will reply to everybody, because it's not, personally, the way I see it is that you could get the first 5 that would be really good, but then number 15 could be really good as well. So again, can't speak about every single recruiter out there, but we will read through them all.
Nice. I'm pleased to hear that. And then final question from someone who's a new immigrant. They've been rejected from roles because they're told they're overqualified, but then they've also been told that they don't have enough New Zealand experience. Do you have any advice for how they can present themselves?
Yeah, that's a very tricky one. And again, being a migrant myself, I understand where you are coming from. It's hard for me to answer without having seen your CV, but I guess I can sort of relate it to an application that was recently made for a role that I'm recruiting for. So I'm recruiting for a software development role, and the person that applied for this particular role had been a CTO for years, so they hadn't worked in a software development role for about 10 years. Okay. Now, I have no doubt that they will have some remnants of what they did as a software developer before. But unfortunately, you have to put yourself in the shoes of what the company is looking for. And if they're looking for a software developer, they're looking for someone who can get started and get on with the job quickly, if it's obvious, because it's a senior position that I'm recruiting for. So if you haven't worked in this particular role for a long time, because maybe where you are from, you were in a leadership or an executive position, it will be really hard for you, or there will be a need to transition back into that hands-on role, which a company will not be willing to do. And it doesn't matter if you're from overseas or not. You could be a New Zealander applying for this role with that same level of experience, you would still be rejected. So my recommendation would be, one, have a conversation and see exactly what roles you could qualify for depending on your experience. And I appreciate that a lot of people were happy to take a step back when they move to New Zealand before they can take a step forward. And do some courses to show that you're prepared to jump back into that role that you're taking a step back on. So again, taking the example of the software development position, if you had been in a leadership position where you haven't been coding hands-on for 5, 6, 7 years, maybe find some courses online. I know that there's plenty of free courses of coding courses that you can do, and then you can put on your CV or in your cover letter, I appreciate that I've not been hands-on for a few years, but I've actually prepared to be in that position by doing some courses to refresh my memory and refresh my hands-on skills. So nice. The upskilling in that way, and in the courses and the actual practical work, will be really important and will make a difference.
Hey, thanks, Chloe. We have gone slightly over time. We could go on for hours. I think this has been great. Your advice is so practical, and I love that it's grounded in your own experience as well as your experience as a recruiter, and really appreciate you sharing these insights with everyone who has joined us today. Your email address is up on your Zoom window now, so people can get a hold of you that way. But give us a shout out for your website and how else people can find out more about you.
Absolutely. So exorecruitment.co.nz, you can go on the website. Very active on LinkedIn if you want to find me. So Chloe Sabadin on LinkedIn, or find our Exo Recruitment page. We do post a lot of information, advice, tips, and all that hopefully are helpful to people that read them. So you're more than welcome to connect here as well.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate your time. And to everyone else, thanks for listening. Hope you enjoyed this lunch and learn.
Thank you for having me, Vic. Thank you.